But it was not immediately that an opportunity of doing so could be commanded, and though they met at least every other evening, either at the park or cottage, and chiefly at the former, they could not be supposed to meet for the sake of conversation. Such a thought would never enter either Sir John or Lady Middleton's head, and therefore very little leisure was ever given for general chat. They met for the sake of eating, drinking, and laughing together, playing at cards or consequences, or any other game that was sufficiently noisy. One or two meetings of this kind had taken place, without affording Elinor any chance of engaging Lucy in private, when Sir John called at the cottage one morning to beg in the name of charity that they would all dine with Lady Middleton that day, as he was obliged to attend the club at Exeter. The insipidity of the meeting was exactly such as Elinor had expected, and she was convinced of the impossibility of engaging Lucy's attention to attempt it. The card table was then placed, and they all rose up in preparation for a round game. "I am glad," said Lady Middleton to Lucy, "you are not going to finish poor little Anna Maria's basket this evening." "Indeed, you are very much mistaken, Lady Middleton. I am only waiting to know whether you can make your party without me. I am resolved to finish the basket after supper." "Perhaps," said Elinor, "if I should happen to cut out, I may be of some use to Miss Steele in rolling papers for her." "Indeed, I shall be very much obliged to you for your help," cried Lucy. Elinor now judged she might safely introduce the interesting subject without any risk of being heard. In a firm, though cautious tone, Elinor began. "I should be undeserving of the confidence you have honoured me with, if I felt no desire for its continuance." "Thank you," cried Lucy warmly, "for breaking the ice. For I was afraid I had offended you by what I told you." "Offended me? How could you suppose so? Indeed, I can easily believe that it was a very great relief to you to acknowledge your situation to me, and be assured that you shall never have reason to repent it. Your case is a very unfortunate one. You seem to me to be surrounded by difficulties. Mr. Ferrars, I believe, is entirely dependent on his mother." "He has only £2,000 of his own. It would be madness to marry upon that. Though Edward's love for me," said Lucy, "has been put to the test by our long absence since we were first engaged, and has stood the trial very well." Elinor hardly knew whether to smile or sigh at this assertion. Lucy went on. "I dare say you have seen enough of Edward to know that he would prefer the church to every other profession. Now my plan is that he should take orders as soon as he can, and then through your interest your brother might be persuaded to give him Norland living. That would be enough for us to marry upon." "But," replied Elinor, "he is brother to Mrs. John Dashwood. That must be recommendation enough to her husband." "Mrs. John Dashwood would not much approve of Edward's going into orders." "Then I rather suspect that my interest would do very little." At length Lucy exclaimed with a deep sigh, "I believe it would be the wisest way to put an end to the business at once by dissolving the engagement. But you will not give me your advice, Miss Dashwood?" "No," answered Elinor with a smile which concealed very agitated feelings. "On such a subject I certainly will not." From this time the subject was never revived by Elinor, and, when entered on by Lucy, it was dismissed as soon as civility would allow. Mrs. Jennings resided every winter in a house in one of the streets near Portman Square. Towards this home she began on the approach of January to turn her thoughts, and thither she one day unexpectedly asked the elder Miss Dashwoods to accompany her. Elinor immediately gave a grateful but absolute denial for both. The reason alleged was their determined resolution of not leaving their mother at that time of year. Mrs. Jennings received the refusal with some surprise, and repeated her invitation immediately. Elinor made no farther direct opposition to the plan, and merely referred it to her mother's decision. Of being informed of the invitation, Mrs. Dashwood would not hear of their declining the offer upon her account, and insisted on their both accepting it directly. After very little farther discourse, it was finally settled that the invitation should be fully accepted. Their departure took place in the first week in January. The Middletons were to follow in about a week. The Miss Steeles kept their station at the park, and were to quit it only with the rest of the family.